Greetings and welcome to the corner, that is TC's Gaming Corner. For my very first video, I am going to start a multi-video tutorial on the GMT game Red Storm. Now Red Storm is a fantastic game of air combat, but many players are intimidated by the 60-page rulebook. Sometimes it's just easier to have someone else teach you a game, or when you can't do that because you don't know anyone else who plays the game, or maybe there's a worldwide pandemic ongoing, or for any other reason you can't get someone else to teach you the game, sometimes a video tutorial may be the next best thing. Now let's start by talking a little bit about the scale for Red Storm. Each hex on the map, each of these hexes, is 2.5 miles across. The turns are 1 minute. The map in the game covers most of West Germany and part of East Germany, and is set in 1987. The units represent flights of 1 to 4 aircraft, and the game kind of straddles between a tactical and an operational game. It's not truly a tactical game because with 2.5 mile hexes, you're not really maneuvering the aircraft the way you would, say, in air superiority or the old air war, where you can see the difference in turning rates, things like that with the aircraft. But there's still a tactical element in that it's still a very detailed game. For instance, if you have a flight of 4 aircraft carrying, you still track by aircraft what their ordnance is, the type of the survival of the crews, the type of damage they have. That's all tracked by aircraft. And here's the plan. This video, I'm going to give you an overview of the sequence of play, and then I'm going to give you the first building block on playing the game, which is moving your air units. The next video will be detection and air combat. Then I'll go over SAMs and jamming. Then the fourth video will be bombing. The fifth video I'm planning will be raid planning and setup. And maybe I'll do a sixth video as kind of a closeout. Now the Red Storm system goes back to the Vietnam Air War game Downtown, the Elusive Victory, which is the Israeli-Egyptian War 1973, and also a World War I game Bloody April that I've never played. Basically in this game you control flights of aircraft. Many of the missions are bombing missions, so you will want to be escorting and or intercepting the missions. You'll have defensive missions on cap, but that's what it is. The game is really about it's wide ranging, whatever your missions are, but generally they revolve around bombing of some sort and escorting, intercepting, etc. those flights. Very briefly, what I'm going to do in this video series, this will be the first video. I want to go over the sequence of play in the game, and then the first building block, which is how to move. The second video will be about detection and air combat. The third will be about surface-to-air missiles and jamming. The fourth will be the mechanics of bombing. The fifth will be raid planning and setup, which is a large part of the game and one of the most interesting parts of the game. In fact, part of me says that half of the game is really the planning phase, because you do map out your bombing flights, where they're going to go. You set your SAM defenses, do lots of things that really impact how the battle is fought. And then I may do a sixth video as kind of a wrap up. Also, at the time of this recording, which is July 2020, the year of the pandemic, GMT has a P500 out for Baltic approaches, which will be an expansion to Red Storm, set, of course, in the Baltic Sea and northern Germany, the same 1987 time frame, which focuses on attacks on naval ships. So it includes some U.S. Navy airplanes and Soviet Warsaw Pact strike aircraft. I've heard some good things about the playtesting on it. So my background with this game, I played a good bit of Elusive Victory, and then I have my good friend who lives 6 time zones away now, and I have been playing a lot of Red Storm since the pandemic started via Vassal. And what you see here is a Vassal shot of the game. It's beautiful to have the whole map spread out when you have the hard copy of the game out, but the good thing about Vassal is there can be a counter-intensive game. So for instance, one of the things that happens is every flight will have a counter on it telling you its altitude. The altitudes are deck, low, medium, high, and very high. But on the Vassal version of the game, if you look right there, you see an H. That's on the counter. That just tells you that it is high flight, high altitude. So one of the advantages of Vassal, like I said, is the counter stacks can be under control. Just a quick update, just to orient you on what is going on right here. This is a in-screen shot from one of the battles I had with a buddy. This is a NATO over here, NATO strike package hitting this airfield, this airfield, this airfield, and this airfield. As you see, two F-111 flights have hit this airfield on this turn. That's a F-4 flight, Wild Weasels, that came through and tried to suppress the AAA. Two more flights of F-111s and then Tornadoes that are going to peel off and hit all these. Over here you see the recon aircraft coming in to assess the results of the strike. You see some some NATO Wild Weasel seed packages that are playing kind of hit and miss with a bunch of SAMs that are located in this area. And here you see where some SAMs launched on this turn. And you see acquisition markers for lock-ons from the SAMs. And, oh, yes, there's some parachute markers here annotating where aircraft were shot down and the pilots and crew successfully parachuted out. Alright, let's get started on the tutorial. The first thing I am going to go over is the sequence of play. This really orients you to the game. The first thing that happens each turn is a random event phase. You roll 2 dice and you check the random events table. The next thing that happens is the jamming phase. This is one of those phases that in some scenarios you skip because there's no jamming aircraft in the battle. On others, it can be a pretty cumbersome and time-consuming thing. But just think, if you have some active jammers like EF-111s during this phase, they set their jamming arc, and if they have the ability to, they can do spot jamming on enemy radars, enemy SAMs. Next phase is the detection phase. Very simply, the aircraft in the battle are in generally 3 states. Here you have unidentified aircraft. There's a question mark in the middle. Sorry, undetected aircraft. Then you have detected aircraft. They have the suit marker. And then you have identified aircraft. Here you see the F-111s. During the detection phase, you roll for every undetected aircraft to see if you detect it. If you have early warning radars or air-to-air radars, you may have additional rolls. The next phase is the movement phase. This is really the crux, the heart of the game. This is where the aircraft move. This is where they bomb if they're bombing. If there's SAMs locked onto the aircraft, this is when the SAMs attack or launched. And if there's any air-to-air combat, it happens in the movement phase. This is, like I said, this is the heart of the game, what happens in the movement phase. Next is the fuel phase, a very short phase. If any aircraft moved at dash throttle, which is afterburner, or engaged in air-to-air combat, you check off one of their fuel supplies. They have a finite amount of fuel. It varies by aircraft type. This is one of the phases that probably could be streamlined, and we often ignore it because we mark off the fuel when we're playing when the aircraft moved. It's kind of hard to remember who moved at dash throttle. It's easier just to do it while you're moving. Next phase is SAM location phase. This can be a really quick one again. Enemy radar SAMs, even if you see the radar transmitting, they cannot be attacked until they're actually physically located. It requires a line of sight. If the SAM launches that turn, pretty good chance you're going to locate them. If there's no SAM launch, you probably won't. Again, SAM location phase is a quick one, often skipped, or it may be resolved with 1 or 2 die rolls. Track phase is where there's a chance that you lose detection on some of the flights. If they're low on the deck or next to mountains, you may lose detection. And then there's also a die roll, that a random chance that you'll lose detection on some of the flights. SAM acquisition phase. If you have SAMs, you have the opportunity to lock on to enemy flights. If you have lock-ons, you have the opportunity. You have to roll to maintain the lock-on or possibly upgrade it. And then finally, the admin phase. It's called the admin phase even though there's some substantive things that happen in there. But admin phase, you basically remove certain markers that are on the map for certain reasons. You can turn on SAM radars or other types of radars. You can move mobile SAMs. There's a lot of little things that can happen during this phase. Like I said, some of them are admin things, some of them are substantive. Turning on the SAMs or turning on radars is a substantive action that during the admin phase. Let's get into the game. Let's talk the basics of movement. First off, one thing to realize is that the turns for the aircraft are 30 degrees. So it can be facing a hex side or a hex spine. It can therefore move along the hex spine and into the hex side, into the hex itself. So understand that. Next, there are 5 altitude levels. I mentioned it earlier. You can be on the deck, as this A-10 is with the D. You can be at low altitude, as this F-16 is, the L. Be at medium. You can be high. And a very few aircraft, really only, I think the MiG-25 can be very high altitude. Next, understand that despite the fact that you have F-16s and MiG-23s, you have a wide variety of aircraft, Su-17s, they all basically fly the same. What matters is the speed they're going at, and the speed that they're going at is what controls their ability to turn. Now, most of your aircraft, so the speed is a function of the following. It's altitude. Higher aircraft generally fly faster. It's throttle setting, which there are 2 throttle settings. You basically, at the beginning of the turn, just decide if you're going at combat speed, which is the regular printed speed, or at dash speed, which is a higher speed. Dash is afterburner, and it uses up one of your fuel points. Also, laden aircraft, if they're carrying air-to-ground ordnance, generally they have a slower speed. It's all listed on these cards. And then there are speed limits for carrying certain type of ordnance. So if you're carrying bombs, your speed limit's usually 4 or 5. Now your speed limits at lower altitudes are generally 3 to 4. At higher altitudes, it's up to about 5, and that's all at combat speed. At dash speed, even your low-level altitude speeds are 4 or 5. Up at dash speed, you might get up to a 7 or 8 for many of these aircraft. Except the MiG-25, which has a whopping 11 at very high altitude. Just to clarify about your speed, at combat speed you can either go the listed combat speed or 1 movement point less. For dash speed, you can go any number of movement points between the combat speed and the maximum listed dash speed. One last pro tip I'm going to give you. Here you see the chart that lists the values, the combat values, the speed values, etc. for the aircraft in the game. But what I've been displaying during the game is actually these wonderful aircraft data cards that are available from the Game Crafter. They are well worth the money you spend on them, and makes organization and referencing your aircraft data much easier than relying on the aircraft data cards. Now, what can you do with these movement points? Well, the first thing you can do, very simple, you move forward a hex. That's 1 movement point. That's 2 movement points. This F-16C at medium altitude has 4 movement points. So you go 3 and 4. You can move and descend 1 level with the same movement point. So 1 and that medium level, he dives down to low, that's 1 movement point. 2 movement points, he could dive down to deck level. Right. You can also move and do a free turn. Now, the free turn is dependent upon the speed. You'll look at this chart here. If the aircraft is moving speed 1 or 2, it can do a free 90-degree turn. 3 or 4, it gets a free 60-degree turn. Speeds 5 to 8, a free 30-degree turn. And greater than 9, no free turn. So if this F-15 at high altitude, which gives him a speed normally of 5, he can do a free 30-degree turn each space. So we'll just say he starts here, So 1 movement point, free turn. 2 movement points, free turn. 3 movement points. Now if you do a turn when you're on a hex side, each turn this way, you have to move into there so that you don't end up on a spine. So that's 1, 2, 3. 4 movement points, free turn. 5 movement points, free turn. Right? So you can get your free turn. You can turn up to your maximum value. So if this F15 is here, if you look at this chart again, you have beyond the free turn, you have a maximum turn in the altitude band. So an F15 moving at speed 5 can turn 90 degrees, but that costs a movement point. So there's 1 movement point. I can spin another movement point to turn 1, 2, 90 degrees. That's 2, 3, 4. Let's spin another movement point. 5. So what else can you do with that movement point? Well, you can climb a level. Let's go with this F16. He's at low altitude. He has a speed of 4. So 1, and then we're going to climb an altitude level. 2. So that's 2 movement points to move 1 and go up high. Now, we're going to move him back here. We're going to get the F15. We're going to put him down at low level. An F15C at low level with dash throttle is 5. So he can go 1. He's going to climb a level. That's 2. 3. Now the second altitude band you gain in a turn costs 2 movement points. So the first one costs 1. This one will cost 2 more. So 1, 2, which is a total of 5. 1, then 2 for the climb, 3, then 4, 5 for the climb. Sorry, and I moved him up to high. He should be there. So again, we're going to do this again. He starts down at low. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The other thing that happens, if you climb 2 spaces in 1 turn, you put 2 altitude levels in 1 turn, you put a zoom climb on him. It's a great marker. Beautiful. F15 zooming up. But that could impact if he undergoes combat, has some other things go on this turn, that can be a modifier for it. Again, you have to be at dash altitude, and it costs 2 movement points for the second altitude. Now some of the aircraft, like this Tu-16, they have different climb rules because they're large aircraft. One of the details I'm not going to get into, just understand that a Tupolev 16 is not going to be zoom climbing, obviously. What else can you do with these free movement points? Well, you can climb and do a free turn. Basically, anytime you spend a movement point, you get your free turn. So this F-16, let's say he's moving at speed 4, climbs to high altitude for 1, and he gets a free 60-degree turn. 2, 3, he'll take a free 60-degree turn, and 4. Right? So he gets his free turn for the climb level. You can dive any number of altitude levels by spinning 1 movement point. So the F-15 is at high level. I'm going to go 1, 2. He's going to dive to the deck. All the way from high to deck, that's 3 movement points. Again, you can you get a free descent for every space you go if you want. Or if you want to go all the way down, that would be a movement point and a second movement point to dive down to the deck. What else can you do with that movement point? Well, if you are diving, if you start off at high level, like this F-15 is, Dallas, you want to dive, you can dive. And guess what? He spent a movement point for that dive, so what can he do when he spends a movement point? He can take his free turn. Remember, the free turn is dependent upon his speed. That is the basics of movement. There are other markers you see over here that can affect how many movement points you get. Maneuver markers, zoom climbs, SAM avoidance, max turn. I will hit max turn very briefly. If the last thing you do in your turn, so let's say this F-16 has moved his 3, as he has a movement value of 5 right now, movement points, goes 4, he's going to spend his 5th movement point to turn there. If the last movement point you spend is to turn, you put a max turn marker on him. Or if the last thing you did in the hex is a free turn, you put a max turn marker on him. Why is that? Well, because the next turn starts, you can spend your first movement point normally. So this MiG-23, he's moving speed 4. I could spend my first movement point to turn 90 degrees normally. If you have a max turn, that tells you that you ended your last turn with a turn. There's a lot of turns in that sentence. So if you end your last turn with a turn, you can't start your next turn with a turn. Right? It makes sense. Otherwise, you could really exceed the movement limitations just by ending with a turn and starting with a turn. That is the basics of movement right there. Let's do some sample flights. Let's start off down here in the bottom with Vera, the Tupolev 16. He's at high level. He can move 3 spaces at normal speed. 1, 2, 3. There you go. This MiG-25 RB Foxbat, very high level. He's got his afterburner going. He can move 11. 1, 2, 3, 4. He gets no free movements above speed 5, above speed 8. 5, 6, 7, 8, 8, 9, 10, 11. Look at that. He flew right over. I used to live right there. My old stomping grounds. This Su-27 at high level has a combat speed of 5, a dash speed of 7. He'll go 1, 2, free turn, 3, 4, 5. He wants to spend a movement point for a 90-degree turn. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. That's his 7. The Sukhoi 17 down on the deck, he is going to be moving at 3. He'll go 1, 2, 3. He'll turn 120 degrees. Now we got the MiG-23 at medium altitude. MiG-23, this is an MLA. At medium altitude, he can go 6. So he'll go 1, 2, free turn, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's taken a free turn this way. Remember, you move him into that. And since he finished his turn with a turn, put a max turn marker on him. All right, tornadoes on the deck. Movement of 4. Combat throttle 5 at dash. He'll be moving 4. So he'll go 1, free turn, 2, 3, 4. At speed 4, their free turns can be up to 60 degrees. So he'll do 60 degrees. All right, we got this F-16, medium altitude. F-16A at medium altitude in dash throttle. Go 6. He'll go 1, 2, free turn 3, 4. He wants to dive all the way down to the deck. So 5. He can get a free turn with that, free 30-degree turn with that dive. 5. That was 1, 2, 3, 4. This is 5, and then 6. And he gets a free turn yet again. If he wants it, he'll take it there. A-10 on the deck, fully loaded, right? An A-10 on the deck has a speed of 2. He's going to go 1 at a speed of 2. Actually, 1 and speed of 2. He gets a free turn of 90 degrees. And then he'll go 2, free turn of 90 degrees. We're going to move this, this F-15 is at low level. He will go 1, climb for 2, 3, 4, 5, put the zoom climb on him. He spent a movement point for that climb though, so he gets a free turn. And then this F-16 at high altitude will go 1, 2. He has speed of 8, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And he also gets a max turn on him. And that is example of some movement. And the last thing we're going to cover is initiative and flight activation order. So what happens is, at the beginning of the movement phase, you roll a D10. On a 1 through 6, NATO has the initiative. On a 7 through 10, the Warsaw Pact has the initiative. Having the initiative means you choose who goes first. And what happens when you go? Well, you draw a chit that will have on the other side a number on it, and whatever that number is the number of aircraft flights that you activate in that activation. If you have there's 2 pools of chits. If you're playing the board game, they'd be in cups. Here on Vassal, it's automated. You draw from the small pool if you have 9 or fewer flights on the board, and that includes dummy flights. We'll talk about dummy flights in another lesson. If you have 10 or more flights on the board, you draw from the large pool. Generally, the numbers on the large chits are smaller than the numbers on the small chits, or larger than the numbers on the small chits. So we'll get into that now. First thing we do is again is you roll a D10, a 4. That's NATO gets the choice. Who's going to go first? We're not going to get into the details of combat and BVR combat, but just suffice it to say that the Sukhoi 27s are within striking range of the F-15s for BVR combat, but not air combat maneuvering. So the NATO player is going to choose to go first. He wants to get his first BVR shots. NATO player has only 4 flights on the board, so he draws from the small chit pool. He gets a 2. That's perfect. So this F-15 would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He will have taken a BVR shot somewhere along the way, or when he got an opportunity. And same thing with Dallas. He will have, let's just say he's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And he wants to do that. So then they will have both taken BVR shots, the Sukhoi 27s. So now, Warsaw Pact player has 10 flights on the map. He draws from the large chip pool. He would activate 4 flights. So we'll send for two of them. We're going to send the Sukhoi 27s in. They would take their BVR shots, and then they would try to engage with the F-15s. That's 2 of them. Warsaw player has 2 more, so these Sukhoi 17s, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. NATO player, it's their turn. Draws from the small chip pool, gets a 3. They only have 2 flights on the board. So these F-16s at speed 5 at combat or 8 at dash have a choice to make. Do they want to stay away from these MiG-21s? They probably do at this point. So he'll go 1, free move 2, 3, 4, free turn, and 5. He'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the rest of the movement would go to the Warsaw Pact player. I would just draw the chit just to show you what it would look like. It would be 2 flights. These MiG-21s are moving at speed 5 or 7. Oh, sorry. Well, he should be at high altitude. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He can't reach those F-16s. And the MiG-21s do not have BVR capabilities. And then these MiG-23s would move, and these Sukhoi 17s would move. just to give you a sample of, there are zeros on the small chits, so that you might think it's your turn and you draw a 0, but just to give you an idea of the numbers available, if you'll look up here, I'm going to draw about 5 smalls. There's a 2, a 1, a 0, a 2, a 2. If you draw them from the large chip pool, there's a 5, a 1, a 1, a 3, and a 3. Again, the turn starts off by rolling for initiative. 1 through 6 NATO player chooses who goes first. 7 through 10 the Warsaw Pact does. Then you start drawing from the large or small chit pool and alternating who draws and who then activates their flights. And there ended the first lesson on movement and activation order. The next video will cover detection and air combat. Once you've learned detection and air combat, you should be able to do some of just the solely air-to-air scenarios. After that, the next lesson will be SAMs and jamming, then bombing, then raid planning and setup. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you on the next episode of The Corner, TC's Gaming Corner, when I'll go over the next lesson in Red Storm.